happening, Stash Nation? We are back live. This is The Secret Stash. I'm your host, Jesse Ibanez. My man, Steve. I love it. Don't you love Engineer Steve? A little round of applause for Engineer Steve. Always keeping it topical. Love is definitely a battlefield. I didn't wake up knowing I was going to quote Pat Benatar today, but that just happened right now. For your benefit, Stash Nation. And in the studio live today for your benefit, we got Michelle Paul. She is the owner of Law Offices of Michelle Paul. You can catch her out. You can catch her out out on the town. You can catch her out in a restaurant. You can also check her out probably at san diego-divorcelaw.com. We've got Michelle in the house because we're trying to vet through all of those integrated complexities which happen inside of that conversation that nobody wants to have when they're getting into the thing in the first place, which is how to unravel it, which unfortunately seems to happen about 50% of the time, according to Michelle earlier. We talked about the emotional game, Michelle. We talked about what the number one rule was, threw you on the hot seat there, which was the client's the enemy. No, not necessarily. The number one job is to protect the client and then also help protect them from themselves. And then figuring out, how do I even know if I've got a case in the first place? Now gets into the weeds, the emotional part of it, like that very challenging element where you love someone, and maybe you don't love them anymore, but whatever, that's totally like this subjective kind of thing. But like the concept of, there you are, you're in the belly of the beast there, standing next to somebody who you trusted, you set this whole thing up in the first place, and now they flipped it on you, and you're totally lost. You know, you got the little buzz wheels, pinwheels in your eye, and the flies are kind of circling around, and you don't know which way's up, you don't know who to trust, you don't know who you can turn to. What are the three questions you got to be asking right then in that spot to be able to get you right again? Number one.
Oh, wow. You know, how short-term goals, because there's obviously your short-term and your long-term goals. And so you really got to get organized. And if you can't do it by yourself, talk to somebody, whether it's an attorney or not, talk to someone you trust. Yeah, because you might not know, right? You might be in shock. Well, you can't be, you're going to be subjective about it. You can't possibly think you're going to be objective about it.
Right.
And so, you know, at this point in your family career here, you're starting to doubt who you are in some cases. And you're going, I don't know if I can trust the decision-making process. So I need a sounding board and I need sound advice. So get your finances in order, and it's hard. And if you got kids, it's so much harder, because that really is what takes over the thought process. Because first and foremost, I'm finding people are going, I don't even care about the house. I don't even care about he can have it all or she can have it all. I just want my kid to be safe. And so it depends if a kid's involved or not. So
let's unravel this a little bit, because I think this is one of those. I've heard you say it almost 2 or 3 times already just in our hour together. What, like, when you think about finances, like let's go like a little punch list. Like what's the number one thing you got to consider? Is it so if you've got kids, right? It's figuring out what.
Well, figuring out when this goes down and when it hits the fan, where are you going to live?
Ooh.
So are you going to stay in the house? Is the spouse going to leave? Because, you know, most people have a preconceived notion that it's always the husband that's leaving. No, I want to say, and honest to God, it's probably a half of our cases. We represent the husband. And the husbands are wondering, you know, does the wife have to leave? We had a situation recently where there was a move-out order with the wife, and she had to leave the premises. So it happens both ways. So the main thing is, because, I mean, seriously, to sustain and to fulfill even your short-term goals to the long-term, you have to know where the money's coming from, and you got to know whether or not you're going to have your own independent money and or you're going to have help from the spouse. And one of the main things that we come across is the bank account, the joint bank account. And so when this hits the fan and the one spouse actually does file, they're wiping out that bank account, and they're
What do you do about that?
Well, you know, you get more technical into the court system. You have to actually go get a pendant light order and ask the judge for the emergency spousal support or child support. So, and that's immediate. You got to do that right away. Go on ex parte. So, unless you understand these terms and you can do it on your own, you really got to get the professional help out.
You know, in my business, this was something that we dealt with a lot when, you know, what all hit the fan back in 2007, 8, like in the housing crisis. And then everybody who was trying to figure it out, who maybe had a couple bucks left in the account, but then wanted to let their home go, they would go and try to wipe out their bank accounts. So that, because they knew in the process, or they had been told that in order to apply for a short sale or some type of loss mitigation, they were going to have to show all their stuff. And then what happened was there started to be lawsuits filed by the banks because they wanted to. They're like, oh, that's odd because when I gave you this loan, you had a bunch of money, and now you're totally about And so they would go back, and I'd imagine the process was random. It was QC or whatever, and then they'd see that they were actually hiding the money, and those people went down.
Oh, yeah. Well, can you say fraudulent conveyance?
I don't know what that word is, but it sounds really cool. But is that kind of similar? That's the reason I'm bringing it up in this context. Like, are you able to kind of go back and prove, no, there was money, he wiped me out, and then they can actually make a court order to have him put the money back in?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, and it goes back to that fiduciary obligation that spouses owe to one another. It is just like us in our profession. You're in real estate, I'm in law. The spouses have the utmost duty of, trust and fiduciary obligation to each other to just basically not do that to one another and to keep it status quo. That's why, and they call it the ATROs, it's the Advanced Temporary Restraining Orders. When you sign for that divorce, you agree, and once that person answers the complaint, you both agree not to transfer the house and not to transfer money and not to close down bank accounts. Mm-hmm. It happens all the time, though, and you just really have to go in and fight when it happens.
What happens if it happens before the ATRO?
It's still a fiduciary duty owed to each other, and then you go in there and say, put the money back. Because it's community. Okay, if you're familiar with the community property terminology. Or
for those that aren't, though.
Right. So you have separate property and community property, and the community property is everything that's earned during the marriage. And so it becomes a 50-50 because we are a 50-50 state. It's a community property state.
Right.
So if you take that money out, it's kind of weird to think about it, but let's say you're both working. And let's say the husband works as a bookkeeper, and he's making, $30 an hour or $25 an hour. Half of that $25 an hour is the wife's. And if she's working as a librarian or a brain surgeon, whatever she's making, half of that is his, all the way down the line. And that's one of the biggest concepts that these people, they're trying to wrap their head around when this is going down. And they're just going, wait a minute, how come half of my money's theirs? It's like, well, it's just how it works.
Or what's even more complicated is like if one of them's a homemaker and maybe doesn't have an income, they still have rights to half the income, right?
Of course.
Yeah, which as they should. Like that, I'm so glad that the court protects the moms out there for that stuff, right? Because it's typically the mom that stays home with the kids.
It's a 50-50 down the line. Right. So even that house, when they have to sell it, when they get divorced, it's going to be half her equity in that house, and half the debt as well, though.
And half the debt as well. Yes,
that's how it works. CP debt.
I need like a little soundbite for that. Yeah. Okay, good. So what I heard you say basically, the key elements are you got to figure out what your goals are, right? And what's a really good spawning question to make sure that their head is pointed in the right direction towards goals? Like what's a question you've noticed that you've asked somebody that has a really profound like adjustment outcome for them once you say, okay, this question right here, like when you're thinking about their goals, where they are right now, where they want to be at the end of this process, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, what's a really good question they can ask themselves?
And this is, you're not going to see this coming, but I'm going to say it anyway. I say to them, when you're telling me what you're telling me, as far as figuring out your goals and what you need to do next, you got to really say to yourself, am I really making these decisions based upon what the other spouse is going to do or think or feel? And if you can get yourself out of that realm, you're really going to stay straight and focused. Because I'm telling you, these people make a decision, well, they're going to get mad if I do this way. Or, they're not going to agree with what I'm doing. It's just like it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's like you got to do what you got to do because you got to protect you, and especially if you have the kids. So. Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because that's counterintuitive to how we are supposed to behave inside the relationship, right? And then all of a sudden...
Right.
The next day comes, and then all of a sudden you got to do a complete 180, and now you got to totally think about yourself. And boy, that's got to be really challenging, huh?
Yeah, I'm fine. And like I said, everybody's different. All these cases we take are different, and like I said, it kind of goes back to the rule number 1 a little bit. And if you can get these people to stop hurting their own case in their own cause, and go, just listen to what I'm saying to you, and just follow the guidance and follow the timeline. Because, I always tell them it's not a 2-step dance. It's probably a 10-step dance. Yeah. We got to get you through all these hoops. Yeah. And it almost dominoes on the other. And there's deadlines, and the paperwork's got to be filled out right.
And the other thing that comes up for me, which I love the brilliance and the wisdom of the 10-step dance, is that the further that you can separate this conversation from emotion, the better off the outcome is probably going to be. When I mean better off, I don't necessarily mean whether you won or they won. I mean, like, when you look back on it and you realize that the only real collateral that exchanges hands in this life is how we leave each other, you want that to be part of your legacy. Even if it didn't go well. Oh, well, it didn't go well, But, especially when you've got, kids, and money involved and stuff like that, it becomes very tense, and you're probably not looking through the right lens in the immediate zone, like the red zone right there, right? So the longer that you can draw that process out, I'd imagine the more clear of a choice you could make. Would you not agree in your experience?
I do. And, and it's funny because I had another little girl in front of me and just recently, and she's military. We do a lot of military, believe it or not, in this town. And we do a lot of
Probably
Marines.
Just because they're young.
I want to say, and we were talking about this the other day, Joe and I, we were crunching the median age, and I want to say we're about early 30s to mid 30s.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so believe it or not, our oldest client is 86.
Well, that makes sense though, because if you think about it, it's either you divorced really young because you blew it, like, you know what I mean, like it
yes,
just
I know that one.
Exploded,
yes.
Whatever, and then or you have kids and you make it there, and then you get to where the kids move out and you realize I don't even like this person anymore. We were only together because of the kids. So that actually kind of makes sense that that's the median if that was the case.
So we get that, and so. With that said, I have this young woman in front of me which, by the way, wise beyond her years, because I want to say she's in her early 30s, and she's just sitting there, and I want to say she sat with me for 2 hours, and I was having a hard time moving her along because she was just lost, and so I said to her, she said to me first, she said, I just can't believe I've got X amount of thousands in the bank, and I can't believe right now that I'm actually have to spend it on this process right now. And so I said to her, and I said, I am going to so enjoy watching your process and watch where you're going to be 6 months from now sitting in front of me and being a stronger person than you are right now. I said, it's going to get better. I can't tell you it is. It just is.
And you can speak from experience,
yes.
which is probably one of the most profound messages that you're able to help them along that path with. That path with. Would you not agree?
I agree.
Yeah. Gang, listen, by the way, Michelle, you're killing it right now, okay? Michelle Paul, Law Office of Michelle Paul. I've dropped your URL about 15 times. I'll do it one more time. It's sandiego-divorcelaw.com, or you can call her at 800-590-4305. We've hammered out the emotional element of this. We talked about the one rule, your number one job, how to figure out if you've got a case, what are the 3 most important questions to ask. There's only one thread left on this conversation. And I'm going to tease it out a little bit. It has to do with a team. Why in the world would you think a team would apply in this conversation? We'll figure that out with Michelle. Real Talk Radio San Diego. We'll be right back.